I'm the wife of a CEO. Don't lump me in with lowlives like you. When I got married and moved in with my mother-in-law, she dumped all the housework on me and treated me like a slave. I had a bad feeling the first time we met to announce our marriage. I could tell she adored her son and didn't seem too fond of me. However, as soon as she learned we needed to move closer to my husband's hometown for his job transfer, she became surprisingly friendly and kind. She then suggested we live together at my husband's family home. She talked about supporting me, making adjustments, and maintaining a healthy distance to live together comfortably. I appreciated the idea, and considering we wouldn't have to pay rent, I agreed to move in. But as soon as we started living together, I became the target of my mother-in-law's disdain. She only harassed and bullied me when we were alone. In front of my father-in-law and husband, she was the perfect wife and mother, never breaking character. My real hell started when the two of them left for work. I was yelled at, insulted, and felt like my spirit was breaking. Feeling at my limit, I decided to confide in someone. That's when things began to change rapidly. My father-in-law came home one day, pale as a ghost, saying the company might go bankrupt. Facing a panicked mother-in-law, he managed to say, "What have you done?" My name is Hazel. I'm a 29-year-old housewife. I work from home while living with my in-laws. A situation that started with my marriage. I used to work hard in a full-time job, gaining knowledge and experience while enjoying a fulfilling life after graduating from college. I met Ian, my husband, at work. Though we were the same age and started the same year, our large trading company assigned us to different departments, so we didn't notice each other at first. However, a few years in, we ended up working on the same project and began working together as colleagues. Ian was an excellent salesperson. His friendly smile and lively way of speaking were great assets in sales, but it was really his personality that won people over. As we worked together, we got along well, going out for meals and drinks after work. Ian loved to eat, drink, and laugh, able to engage in both fun and serious conversations. Spending time together, we were drawn to each other, and after Ian asked me to be his girlfriend, we quickly started living together. Despite our busy schedules, living together allowed us to share our daily lives, support each other, and enjoy our time together. It was crucial for us to live in the same house, as being apart might have led to misunderstandings or forced efforts to spend time together, potentially ruining our relationship. So, when Ian was transferred and proposed to me, I felt we had to move together. The transfer was part of an expansion, with Ian and a team of elite employees sent to establish a new branch office. The distance to the headquarters would require a train ride, leaving our future uncertain, whether we'd return to headquarters or rise through the ranks at the new branch. At that time, I was working in the planning department at headquarters, with no chance of transferring to the new branch. That's exactly why Ian proposed at that time. Even if you continue to work at the headquarters, I want to make sure we're officially registered. Ian probably said that because he had a hunch that if it turned into just a long-distance relationship, we might end up splitting up. He wanted to make our relationship official, feeling that physical distance might not allow us to maintain what we had. So, I accepted Ian's proposal and decided to follow him. Honestly, I struggled with the idea of losing my current career. Still, I've always believed that no experience goes to waste, so I was able to think positively about diving into a new environment and situation. Luckily, people at my company understood my situation and arranged for me to work from home for a related company well in advance. This allowed me to plan the handover of my work with plenty of time to spare, and it seemed like there wouldn't be any major problems work-wise. Ian and I also needed to start moving towards our marriage. This included reporting to and greeting our parents, deciding on a new home, and registering our marriage along with all the related paperwork. We had to manage these tasks on weekends. My parents' home is about an hour's train ride from where we live now, and I went to report our decision to get married as soon as we had decided. My parents are still active in their jobs and tend not to interfere in their children's lives, including mine. They've always said, "Take responsibility for your own life and strive to live happily." While I trust that they would surely help if I were really in trouble, they usually don't expect anything from me and we barely communicate unless necessary. This might seem like a casual relationship, but it works well for our family. Therefore, when Ian and I went to announce our marriage, after a formal conversation, it turned into a normal meal together in a harmonious atmosphere and ended pleasantly. By the way, we don't wish to have a wedding ceremony. I don't yearn for bridal attire, and the thought of squeezing out time for preparations amidst our busy schedules makes me feel gloomy. Since most of the guests would likely be colleagues anyway, we concluded it wasn't necessary. When I told my parents this, they said, "Do as you wish," which was a relief. However, since there won't be a wedding ceremony, we'll need to find another time for both sets of parents to meet. Ian's family home is a bit far. Actually closer to our new place of work than our current home. It seems part of the reason Ian was chosen for the new project was because he's from that area. Ian's father runs a company, and my parents are also busy with work. With all our obligations, we decided to wait until things settled down before arranging a meeting with our parents. For now, we've successfully reported to my family. Next is Ian's turn. We decided to take an early train on our day off to visit Ian's family home. After the greetings, we planned to look around the area where the new branch office would be and then return home the same day. We'll focus on finding a new place to live when we have more time to dedicate to it. Guided by Ian, we arrived at a large single-family home. As I thought about this being the place where Ian grew up, I felt moved but also a bit nervous.
Welcome back, Ian. Come in, please.
Ian's parents welcomed us at the entrance. His mother was overflowing with joy at Ian's return. Being an only child, Ian was dearly loved as he grew up. I thought Ian's father looked like a businessman through and through. Dressed casually but with a straight posture and commanding presence. His gentle smile balanced his authoritative demeanor, suggesting he must be quite formidable in business.
Once again, this is Hazel. Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to see us today.
We entered the house and sat down at the dining table, facing each other. Ian introduced me, talking about our upcoming marriage registration and the hustle of preparations. The conversation was mostly led by Ian's father, while his mother sat by silently, barely changing her expression. Given her reaction earlier, it seems likely that the idea of her son bringing home a marriage partner isn't exactly welcome. I've heard stories about mothers feeling like their sons are being stolen away. To be honest, this leaves me a bit uneasy.
Next year, I'm gonna be transferred here. I'll let you know the details about the move once they're settled. Here? Does that mean you'll be staying for good? Where will you be working?
When Ian brought up the transfer, his mother perked up, bombarding him with questions. It must be good news for her. Ian had moved out for college and stayed in that city for work, so his visits home were limited to a few times a year at best. She must be delighted at the thought of having her dear son closer and being able to see him more often.
Then you might as well live here.
Hearing this, his mother eagerly suggested. It was a bolt from the blue for me. I knew we'd be close to Ian's hometown, but the idea of living together never crossed my mind.
It's important for you two to have your own life, but renting a place costs a pretty penny, right? If you stay with us, you won't have to worry about rent at least.
His mother started her persuasion. She had a point. Switching to remote work meant our household income would decrease. And although rent is cheaper here than where we currently live, a place with adequate space would still cost a significant amount. I had been thinking about the need to economize.
Besides, starting a new life in an unfamiliar area can be tough, right? Hazel, you have work even if it's from home, don't you? I can help out with things around here.
I was taken aback to be suddenly called Hazel. I had thought she wouldn't even make eye contact with me before.
You might be hesitant about living with in-laws, but fortunately, we have spare rooms and the house is spacious enough to maintain some distance.
Indeed, in a house this size, there would be spare rooms. Hearing her mention maintaining some distance made me feel a bit more at ease. It's way better than being told to feel free to say anything because we're family. It's impossible not to be reserved, we're not really family. So no matter what's said, there's bound to be some level of courtesy.
Ian's commute wouldn't be a problem, right? He could even use our car for it. Right?
After his mother's words, I glanced at Ian, who pondered for a moment before responding.
In terms of commuting, it wouldn't make much difference, car or train. From leaving the house to getting to the office, it's about 40 minutes.
That means the commute time would be about the same as it is now. It doesn't seem like it would be too much of a burden.
What do you think? Living here might be nice,
his mother said, looking at Ian.
Well, I don't have a problem with it, but...
Then Ian glanced at me. Since it's his childhood home, it wouldn't be a problem for him. He seems to be considering my feelings, but phrasing it like that in this situation makes it seem like if I refused, I'd be the bad guy.
Hazel might have a lot to think about, but let's adjust as we go along, shall we? We're not moving in right away, so we've got time to get things in order. If you have any requests, you can tell me through Ian, okay?
His mother said with a smile. Indeed, you don't know how you'll feel about living somewhere until you try it. We haven't decided to live here forever, and there might be a chance we'll return to the headquarters. If it proves difficult, we could always find a reason to move out later.
I'll take you up on that offer, then. Great. I'm looking forward to it.
And just like that, it was decided that we would live with Ian's family. If I could turn back time, I'd strongly advise myself against it.
Hey! I'm going out, so make sure everything is taken care of.
Today, like many days, my mother-in-law is heading out with friends. I watched her leave, hysterically yelling orders, as I hung up the laundry for the entire family. The mother-in-law, who had been all smiles at our first meeting, suggesting we live together while maintaining a reasonable distance, turned out to be completely different once we started living together. She has a remarkable duality. To me, she acts one way, but in front of her husband and Ian, she's the good wife, good mother. She carries his bag to the door when he leaves for work, cheerfully greets the chauffeur of the town car, and follows Ian around the house, eager to tend to his needs. Ian, however, likes to prepare himself as he's accustomed to his routine, but she insists on hovering around him. When Ian leaves, he always says, "This is fine. You don't need to see me off." A practice we've maintained since living together. Our work schedules slightly differed, and our mornings were hectic with preparation and chores, so we were content with just saying I'm off. Ian once mentioned feeling rushed if someone saw him off, so I make it a point not to follow him to the door. Despite Ian's protests, his mother follows him to the door and watches until his car is out of sight, satisfied only when her beloved son is safely on his way. Once back inside, she transforms.
How long are you going to be washing those dishes, you slowpoke? There's laundry and cleaning to do.
She hurls insults and spews out commands with a loud, intimidating voice. The first time I saw this side of her, I was genuinely shocked. I regretted agreeing to live together almost instantly.
A daughter-in-law is just a slave. Take care of the house perfectly. Your little side job can wait.
She dumped all the housework on me. I was prepared for some level of sharing chores, but I didn't expect everything to fall on my shoulders. Moreover, she nitpicks the chores I do, looking for faults like someone picking at the corners of a tightly sealed box, demanding I re-wash dishes or claiming the cleaning isn't up to her standards. However, her frequent outings were a slight relief, as they allowed me to work. I needed to align with business hours for my job, and disruptions were problematic. Yet, she belittles my work as just earning pocket money, getting furious if I prioritize it over household tasks. At first, I tried to stand up to her. The situation was far from what was initially promised, and it was she who offered support. So, I gathered my courage and addressed it, but she just kept yelling, "I'm the wife of a CEO. Don't lump me in with someone lowly like you. Don't get cheeky with me just because you're the daughter-in-law." The more I tried to communicate, the more she retaliated with tenfold intensity, making it unbearable to continue. Now, I find myself having no choice but to comply. I thought I had a decent tolerance for stress from my years of working, but this situation is crushing my spirit. Being constantly subjected to her hysterical malice makes me shrink back. What's incredible about my mother-in-law is her ability to never break character as the good wife, good mother. In front of her husband and Ian, they would never imagine her screaming at me. I've considered confiding in Ian many times. He would likely listen and, even if finding it hard to believe his mother's true nature, wouldn't ignore my concerns. Yet, condemning his mother is a difficult step to take, and I doubt he'd appreciate hearing his mother spoken ill of, given he sees her as a good mother. Even if Ian were to talk to his mother about stopping the harassment, I can hardly imagine her becoming docile afterwards. She might act meek in front of Ian, but who knows what would happen when it's just the two of us. The thought of her behavior escalating is terrifying. Even if we decided to move out, preparing for that would take time, during which I'd still have to stay here. And if it were decided that we're leaving together, I'd be branded the villain for sure. Anything could happen. But I'm reaching my limit. I might really break if this continues. After much thought, I decided to seek help from someone. One evening, my father-in-law came home looking distressed.
What's wrong, dear?
The company might be going under.
What? How come?
My father-in-law and mother-in-law were having this conversation while I was preparing dinner. And Ian, who had just returned home, sensed something was amiss and listened in. A major client just canceled their contract with us. Our company largely depended on that deal, so now.
Why would they suddenly do that? Can't something be done?
My mother-in-law was clinging to my father-in-law, asking desperately. The person in charge of the account was repeatedly late, and there were several errors in the contracts despite warnings. It seems things never improved.
All that for this? That's terrible. Which company is it?
Upon hearing the company's name from my father-in-law, Ian froze, looked at me, and said,
Isn't that your grandmother's company?
For a moment, it was as if time stopped in the house. Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law turned their gaze towards me. And then, suddenly, my mother-in-law charged at me.
You! What have you done to our company? Getting cocky just because you're a slave. Hey, Mom!
She grabbed my shoulder, continuing to hurl insults as usual. Ian, witnessing this behavior for the first time, tried to intervene, clearly shaken.
I was just being honest about our living situation when my grandfather asked.
I replied. It was the truth.
This damn daughter-in-law.
As my mother-in-law raised her hand, I braced myself, thinking if she's going to hit me, then let her.
Mom! Stop it!
Ian grabbed her arm to stop her, and my father-in-law came rushing over, shouting. Then, staring intently at my mother-in-law, he muttered.
So it was you.
My mother-in-law, not understanding, just stared back at him in confusion.
What have you done?
With his face contorting as if it made a noise, my father-in-law's words came out strained. My mother-in-law, still not grasping the situation, looked at him bewilderedly, asking.
What? What do you mean? The chairman told me, a man who can't even see through his own wife's true nature can't possibly educate his employees properly.
That's right, I remember now. Thinking back to the conversation I had with my grandfather yesterday.
Long time no see, Grandpa. How are you doing, Hazel?
Yesterday, I had a video call on a tablet with my maternal grandfather, whom I hadn't had a chance to see before moving here. We had a remote lunch together during our lunch break. My maternal grandfather, who built and grew his company from scratch, is still supporting it as its chairman even in his 70s. Despite being busy, we hadn't been able to meet due to not finding the right timing.
Congratulations on your marriage. I would have liked to see you in your wedding dress.
I'm sorry, I wasn't really interested in having a wedding.
You'll come back here sometimes, right? Let's go out for dinner with your husband. Yeah, I'll let you know when. So, how is it? Is everything okay over there?
My grandfather asked because he was aware of the business dealings between his company and my father-in-law's company. When my marriage was decided, I informed my grandfather over the phone, and that's when it became clear. He figured it out from Ian's hometown, his last name, and the fact that his father runs a company. Back then, he had said that company's sales department is a bit off. That's why he told me.
Keep the fact that our company, or rather, our relationship, a secret from the other party. They won't notice as long as you keep quiet since we have different last names. I'm a bit uneasy about trusting them. It's better to be unnecessarily cautious, but if anything happens, consult me right away.
Indeed, or rather, unsurprisingly, my grandfather's intuition was correct. I had mentioned my grandfather's company to Ian, but not that it had any relation to his father's company. Ian was hands-off when it came to his parents' company, so he probably didn't know. It was fortunate for me. Grandpa, actually. And so, I told my grandfather everything about my life here. As expected, or rather, beyond my imagination, my grandfather was quietly furious.
It all connects. A fool who can't even discern his wife's true nature can't possibly pay attention to training the staff at the bottom, which means the entire company cannot be trusted.
That was the first time I heard about the misconduct of the sales employees at my father-in-law's company. They were habitual latecomers, laughing it off and not understanding their position even when they did arrive late. There were always issues with the contracts, and when we would refuse to proceed due to these errors, they tried to push through carelessly. Despite complaints and requests to change the sales representative, a manager from my father-in-law's company would call to apologize, saying, "We're short-staffed," and nothing would change. Considering the salespeople I've seen Ian work with and those I've dealt with in my business, the incompetence was unthinkable. Apparently, there had been discussions within my grandfather's company about stopping business with my father-in-law's company and finding someone else. Despite being in a position where my father-in-law's company owed a lot to my grandfather's, the neglectful attitude had caused significant backlash within. And the treatment I received from my mother-in-law was the final straw for my grandfather.
I'll take care of that company, don't worry about it. How about you get a divorce and come back?
My grandfather, though not in a calm manner, casually mentioned this.
I don't have any complaints about Ian, so I'm not considering divorce.
If only Ian could return to the headquarters, that would be ideal, he said, probably feeling lonely because of the physical distance that had grown between us. Seeing a glimpse of my grandfather's true feelings made me smile. My maternal grandfather, despite being busy, often made time for my school events and milestones. Even on weekdays, he would take time off work to be there. That's quite rare for a man of his generation. I'm aware of how much he doted on me.
I'm sorry for worrying you, Grandpa.
It's shameful that at my age, all I can do is rely on others.
I'm glad Hazel talked to me. As a result, my worries will disappear,
Grandpa says with a hearty laugh. Whether his concern was about me, the company, or both, it wasn't clear.
Thank you, Grandpa. Don't mention it. Just make sure to contact me when you know the day you're coming back here.
Yes, sir. That was the conversation I had with my grandfather yesterday. Grandpa's actions were quicker than I imagined.
Hazel, could you tell me what Nova has done?
My father-in-law says to me. He must have connected the dots after what Grandpa said.
What are you saying? You shut up. Or are you going to explain it yourself?
My mother-in-law interjects in a panic, but my father-in-law, who has grasped the situation, sternly rebukes her. My mother-in-law is left speechless. So, I told them everything. How I was treated like a slave. How she looked down on me, saying her status as the CEO's wife was different from mine. How all the housework was dumped on me, making it difficult to find time for my job. How she would go out shopping or for lunch every day, but upon returning, she would nitpick my cleaning and make me do it again. How she would stop me from going out, saying I shouldn't be playing around. How she would check everything I bought. All these things happened only when it was just the two of us.
Mom, you did such things? What have you done? You can't undo this.
Her beloved son looks at her with contempt, and her husband scolds her harshly, while she looks back and forth between them. Unable to comprehend why she's in such a predicament. She must have thought her husband and son would take her side.
I'm sorry, Hazel, for not realizing you were the chairman's granddaughter. No, irrespective of the company, such behavior is inexcusable. I truly apologize.
My father-in-law repeatedly apologized in front of me. It was slightly uncomfortable since I deliberately didn't mention being the chairman's granddaughter, but I was surprised to be apologized to in such a manner. I couldn't say it's okay or I forgive you, but I felt a bit lighter.
Hazel, I'm sorry, I didn't notice either.
Ian says, looking stunned.
It's okay, I couldn't say anything either.
I should have paid more attention to you.
Sorry, it's hard to talk about my own mom.
My father-in-law and Ian both apologized to me, while my mother-in-law glares at us with a furious expression. Grinding her teeth and trembling with anger. She's irate that they're siding with me and that I'm the granddaughter of someone with higher status than her husband. Yet, not everything has been revealed.
And father-in-law, my mother-in-law goes out shopping or for lunch every day. Did you notice the branded items piled up in the back room?
Upon hearing my words, my mother-in-law's eyes widen in shock as she snaps at me.
Why do you know that? Because you told me to clean every room. We're talking to father-in-law right now. Could you please be quiet for a moment? What? It may be presumptuous of me, but I think you should check the account balances and card statements.
When I said that, my father-in-law turned on his heel to stand in front of my mother-in-law.
Nova, bring your card and the family credit one here.
He called out in a low voice. A tone I had never heard from him before.
Why? To check. Well, I haven't used them so much, and, just bring them. How about later? Ian must be hungry too. Bring the cards now.
She must have really not wanted to show them. Despite her objections, my mother-in-law was startled by my father-in-law's loud voice and started moving. She left the dining room and returned with heavy steps, handing over the cards to my father-in-law. As he checked the cards, deep wrinkles formed between his brows. Then, holding a credit card in one hand, he began typing something into his smartphone. He was likely using an online service to view the statements. After staring at the phone screen for a while, my father-in-law let out a long sigh.
What is this?
In front of my father-in-law, my mother-in-law shrank and looked down. Her face pale with fear. She must have been misusing the funds entrusted to her for household management. The hidden branded goods must be numerous. I can only imagine the total cost being astronomical.
Leave this house. We're getting a divorce,
he said in a voice devoid of emotion. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock.
Impossible, I have nowhere to go. Is that so? Then, I'll provide you with some money for the time being. However, I'll be filing for alimony, so find a place to live and a job as soon as possible. Alimony? Why? You don't understand? Then, a lawyer will contact you later, and you can ask them. It's impossible, impossible.
My father-in-law, having reached the end of his tether, showed no mercy. He pulled out all the cash from his wallet, probably about $2,000, and handed it to my mother-in-law. Then, he dragged her to the bedroom to pack her bags and kicked her out of the house. Ian and I weren't in the dining room to see everything, but we could hear my mother-in-law sobbing and muttering something as she was being expelled. My father-in-law then locked the door behind her. And so, my days of being tormented by my mother-in-law came to an end. After being thrown out, she's been living alone in a cheap apartment, working part-time. Her habit of looking down on other women, born out of her former status as a CEO's wife, hasn't changed, leading to her isolation among her fellow part-time workers. Ian occasionally receives complaint calls from her, but he's been growing increasingly fed up, sometimes lecturing her before hanging up or not answering at all. She seems to be living a difficult and stressful life, but it's a situation of her own making. Meanwhile, my father-in-law spent some time near my grandfather's company, visiting daily. He demoted the problematic sales representative and, along with the new sales team, went on an apology tour to my grandfather, the CEO, directors, and relevant departments. Thanks to these efforts, the cancellation was withdrawn, and they managed to re-establish the contract, as I heard from my grandfather. Despite the issues, his recovery efforts were commendable. Ian and I are still living with my father-in-law. With my mother-in-law gone, I've been able to live freely, relaxing both physically and mentally. Recently, I found out I'm pregnant. Ian, of course, my father-in-law, my parents, and my grandfather are all thrilled for us and are taking great care of my health. We're now consciously taking it easy, utilizing services like housekeeping. Eagerly awaiting the day our family grows, and enjoying our happy days.